All right, we're going to talk about what it takes to do some of the lightweight modifications to your factory Tikka. So I've got here a factory Tikka bolt. Show you how to swap out a bolt knob. Pretty simple. You're going to just take the end, the black end cap here, and it's going to, if you want to do this just by hand, grab on there, get a good tight grip, and just pull it out of this little notch. There's if you look real close, there's a little square rectangular shaped notch there, and you're just going to get a good handle on it and pop it. You're going to rotate it. I guess that would be clockwise until it stops, and the cap is going to come off straight out. Don't lose the spring that's holding it in there. In this case, I don't think I weighed that cap in our video about the weight, so I'll give you that real quick. This is the heavier of the two options. This is your steel cap, and it's weighing in at 30.13 grams. So when you're to this point, it's important to then take some sort of a small diameter tool like this little Allen wrench here, and you're going to put it through the gap. There's a gap that's there between the firing pin and the outer rim, and you're going to use that kind of as some leverage, and you're going to pop it. It's going to pop into the first notch, and you're going to keep rotating it past that to where it pops down into the deeper groove. Now, keep your Allen key in between there. You'll notice now it's good and tight. It's under tension at this point. But once you get to that point and it's centered, this bolt knob is ready to work out. Sometimes they're a little bit tight, but you're just going to work that free. And you've got your new bolt knob you're going to install, and it just slides right into place. Make sure it stays lined up. And then you can use now your Allen as some leverage and rotate it back through to the original position. Slide your end cap on, and while holding it down in tension, it slides into its first notch. And just give it a double check. It's all good, and you've got your new bolt handle. So pretty simple process. I'm going to take this back apart here. If while you are in the process of doing this, it's probably wise you can take your firing pin apart, or take the firing pin out, and you can inspect it. You can see if there's any damage or it needs to be cleaned. Goes back in, bolt knob in place. Make sure it's lined up. Rotates around. And you're done. Okay, back to the position it was in to begin with, ready to slide back in your rifle. Okay, so the next, probably the easiest thing to swap out is going to be your action screws and your the recoil lug itself. Okay, so you've got either your factory black steel or your stainless steel options here. So this one from Mountain Tactical, and your stainless steel. It's certainly a nice upgrade, but it's not a weight savings by any stretch over the factory. You can take your new one after removing the old factory, or the factory recoil lug is just going to slide out. It may take a little bit of prying to do so. You might have to get in there with a pair of pliers or something to pull it out all the way. Get that out, and it doesn't matter what stock you've got, whether you've got your factory stock or an aftermarket stock. You can then take that new recoil lug, and it's just going to set right down in. Some of them are going to be a tighter fit than others. Make sure that gets all the way in there until it rests on the bottom. Okay, and popped in nice and tight. what you want. You want that to be good and tight. You don't want movement in your action, in your contact between your action and your stock. So you've got your factory plastic bottom metal, or maybe you've upgraded to a metal bottom metal. You're going to be able to turn around, take that bottom metal, and make sure it lines up. If you're putting it in a aftermarket stock, just make sure everything fits properly and it's good and tight. And then you've got, you know, the inserting and the replacing of the action screws obviously is no different than putting your action screws in to begin with. Long action screw goes to the back, short action screws goes to the front, and obviously as long as they are the same length as your factory screws, everything's gonna be identical. Okay. Simple modification, just a few bucks to buy the parts. Okay, so this next one is it might be a little bit scarier. Taking off and replacing the factory trigger bolt. I got the right Allen here. No, that's not the right one. Still not the right one. That should be it. There you go. All right. So find yourself the right size bit to get that removed. And then it's just a matter of, I've got my torque wrench here set to about 60 pounds, which I found tends to be about where these screws seem to be. Now in this case, I've got my trigger set screw is like it's going to be just a hair too long. So if you notice, the trigger, the set screw to adjust your trigger pull is going to run into your bolt, your factory little bolt there. And so righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, you can tighten that down, which is actually going to increase trigger pull. So you tighten it down a little bit so that you can get the bolt past that adjustment screw. And once that's free, sit this down so I have two hands. I just try and support the trigger itself until it comes free. And you can stop at this point. Now I will point out there's this little tab that is in some of your aftermarket stocks, that's going to have to be removed for it to fit. Something like the KRG Bravo, it's not going to fit, or a chassis system. Typically you're going to need to remove that little piece anyways. Okay, so I've got my titanium screw that's going to go in its place. I can thread that back in there by hand. Make sure it's seated perfectly back in line with where it was. Just a little bit of tension, make sure that everything is lining up exactly how I want it. I'm going to get it cranked down good and tight. Okay, and that's all there is to it. Now, I would point out that there may be some wisdom in taking a teeny bit of some sort of a thread locker and putting a little dab on that screw or some of these others that you just don't want them moving, either under recoil or otherwise. So if you are worried about that, you can put a little bit of thread locker on there, and because you don't want any of that to kind of run into your action or anything, you want to make sure it's a little tacky before you screw it in there. Maybe use a hairdryer or something, get it a little bit, starting to get tacky. Get it tightened in there, and then you know, again, a hairdryer or something to get it to set a little bit quicker than maybe you would otherwise, just letting it sit. Obviously, your last step here is going to be to make sure that your trigger set screw is where it needs to be. So in this case, I'm going to start by, where's my bolt for this one? I'm going to start by double checking that my trigger went back together properly. Something didn't become dislodged. Make sure that my safety prevents the trigger from being pulled. Let's do a basic function check. Not difficult to pull a Tikka bolt out, but sometimes when you're trying to do things backwards, it becomes a little awkward. Okay, so I know I backed it out about a turn, or excuse me, I backed it in about a turn. I'm going to back it back out to where I had it. I like a really, really light trigger pull. You can double check though. You can lighten these triggers up too much. You get to a point where there's play in that trigger, you've gone too far. That's about where I like it. So you've got your trigger set, the trigger bolts back in. If I was going to be putting this in the chassis, I'd be done. In this case, I think this one's probably going to go into this stock, and so it probably behooves me to put my this little tab back in, but I'll do that off camera later. So the last little thing that you can change if you so desire, and we discussed this in the last video, it's not a big weight savings, but you're take this back out. Make it a little bit easier here. The bolt catch here can be replaced. Oftentimes a little pin here in the bottom that is holding it in just needs a little tension taken off for that to slide right out. You do want to make sure you hold that down. As you pull it out, there's a little spring in there you don't want to lose. Little tiny spring. And you can set that off to the side and take your new one. And it's just drop-in fit. You do need that spring though. Just line that up with the little tab that's there. Give it some pressure. And your pin just slides right back in. It's looking hard to get it the last little bit. You're good to go. So those are the various little titanium parts that you can replace to lighten up your factory Tikka. So while we didn't discuss it in the previous video, some of the more more obvious places that you can save weight overall on your Tikka, or any rifle for that matter, is going to be in your optic setup, whatever that might be. Now, my optic setups are always purpose driven. What I mean by that is the optic itself is serving a particular purpose that's defined by the functions that the particular scope's gonna provide. So in this case, this scope's got has dialing turrets. It's got 15 power zoom capabilities. It's got an illuminated reticle. This scope I've intended for a little bit longer range work, specifically because it's a 223, small game, coyotes, rabbits, those kinds of things. That smaller targets, I need the zoom capabilities. I need to be able to see a small target at 400 yards potentially, and I need the ability to adjust for different ranges. And so all of that being said, that adds weight. That those features are ultimately gonna make for a heavier scope than I might need for other purposes. So this particular scope here is a Trijicon Credo 2.5 to 15. It's weighing in at 22.9 ounces without the illuminated reticle battery, and that adds about 1/10 of an ounce. So you're right at about 23 ounces, everything ready to go. You've got another 3 ounces in these D&Z one-piece rings, and another ounce in your scope caps. If you want to contrast that, excuse me, with this little scope here, this scope only weighs 13 ounces, so 10 ounces less. But it's not gonna have some of the other features. It's not gonna have the dialing reticle or the dials for adjustment for range. It does have a reticle that has some mil dots I can use to range off of and gauge the height off of above the animal I would need at various yardages, but it's not going to be quite as precise as the dialing scope would be. This is only a 3 to 9. It's not going to have the zoom capabilities. This is a 1-inch diameter tube versus the 30mm tube, so it's definitely going to be lighter in that regard. And at the end of the day, this is probably for big game hunting, something out to 300-400 yards, something if you wanted to set your zero at 200 with a flat shooting round. It's gonna do the job, and it's a fairly basic scope, but it serves the purpose intended in this configuration and allows for a lighter scope for this purpose. So look at your needs. You could certainly go with a dialing scope like this, and you could have a scope that weighed another 10 ounces heavier than this, and really not get that much more, that many more features out of it. You might get a 20 or a 25 power zoom if that was important to you, or you might get a bigger objective lens. So there are things you could get if you needed it, but generally speaking, I'm going to limit my my weight gain as much as possible by choosing an optic that is as light for its feature set as possible. And in this case, I consider this Trijicon Credo to be the lightest full-featured scope that I can buy, that is still going to hold zero. It's going to be robust. There's a lot of evidence from other users online that suggests that it will withstand a lot of abuse, bumps and dings and such, and it's still going to hold zero at the end of the day. I mean, I could buy a lighter weight scope. There are lighter weight scopes out there, but That'll be a conversation for another day, but I've had failures in lighter weight scopes that were not built as robust. And I need scopes that I can trust. And so that's going to cost me a few ounces, but at the end of the day, I need a rifle system that's going to be able to be accurate. And that's going to be what's most important. The weight loss is great, and it makes it much easier to carry in the field, but at the end of the day, it still needs to be able to hit what I'm aiming at and be able to take ethical shots. So any questions you might have about some of these improvements, just put them in the comments below, and I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you.